Hello, this is Tia, and welcome to another video. Today we are reading chapter 27 of Hermitcraft Freedom. Yeah. If you don't already know, this is a Minecraft-inspired, fan-made series where I put Minecraft YouTubers that I particularly watch and put them in the story and see what happens. Of course, in the universe, all the Minecraft YouTubers are somewhere out there, but I just focus on a few characters whenever a story comes up, and yeah, my latest obsession is Hermitcraft. So, yeah, and every now and then we just do a Stappy cameo whenever. But yeah, story is not related to anything that the hermits are doing, so if you're worried about that, don't worry about it. You don't have to watch all the other previous stuff, but I mean, it is, like, I would, of course, obviously recommend it, because I could use the watch hours, but that's ultimately up to you. But enough rambling, let's get into it. And yeah, there are captions available for the chapter if you want to just read along. Let's go. Liam stood beside his brother, Blake, unable to move his eyes from the machine. Kate was inside it, the lights flashing as two metal bars pricked both her arms. The girl was now slumped in her seat, as Robert Kimberly was pushing Richard aside, pressing buttons frantically. "No, you can't interrupt the process. It could kill her," Richard warned, grabbing the man's arm. "We need to stop this now. Can't you see the state she's in? She's lost too much blood." Blood. Color drained from Liam's face as he swallowed. The girl's face was pale as paper, her lips beginning to turn blue. The compartment beside her with the robot starting up, putting pieces of machinery together. "We can't stop now. We're so close," Richard hissed, finally dragging Robert from the control panel. As the glass door to Kate's container flew open, the machinery slowing to a stop. "What did you do?" "I turned it off. Let me go." Robert yanked away from the man, running up to the platform before pulling the restraints from the girl. He knelt in front of her, gently shaking her by the shoulders. "Caitlin. Kate, can you hear me? Please tell me you can hear me." "You made a big mistake," Richard growled, pulling out a sword as he approached the man. "My brother was right. You've become a liability. You care too much about the girl. She's my daughter." Robert got to his feet, lifting the girl into his arms. "I'm taking her to a doctor. She needs medical attention." "You've already doomed her," Richard snarled, tightening his grip on the blade. The machine was programmed to give her samples from other victims we'd gathered, so she'd have a better chance of recovery. "I looked in the machine earlier. There were no other samples," Robert said firmly. "You wanted her to die." "Of course I do!" Richard took a step onto the podium. "She's foiled our plans far too many times. She and her friends must be dealt with. It baffles me that you can't see it." "She's my daughter." Robert narrowed his eyes. She had us arrested." "She was only doing what she thought was right," Robert said matter-of-factly. "I still may not understand why she would go out of her way for these people, but she did. She cared enough to put her life on the line to save them." Tears burned in the man's eyes as he looked down at the limp 13-year-old girl in his arms. Never knew someone so brave. As brave, fearless, as selfless as her. He kissed the girl's forehead. "I'm so proud of you, Kate." "Robert, move!" Stampy shouted. The man looked up in time to see Richard lunge at him. Robert jumped off the platform, running toward the door with the girl in his arms. He stopped in his tracks when Rob appeared before him. I don't think you'll be going anywhere with her. Rob's eyes flashed as Richard charged from behind, thrusting his sword as the blade pierced through the man. Robert screamed, dropping Kate as the girl fell limply to the floor. Liam watched, horrified, as Richard lunged at him again, slamming his sword over Robert's head. Robert crumpled to the floor, growing limp before Richard stabbed him for good measure, until you disappeared in a puff of smoke and ash. The only thing that remained were floating items. Richard stared down at the items, glowering as he shook his head. Satisfied? Conover asked. Plenty. Richard seized, putting away his sword as he went over to the girl, grabbing her roughly as he headed back to the machine. Let's finish this. No! Green screamed, struggling against his restraints as Liam looked over at Sam and Blake. Kate! Kate! Suddenly, an explosion rocked the ground as Liam stumbled, grabbing onto the iron bars before he could fall. Another explosion ripped through the air as part of the ceiling above the machine crumbled. Richard stumbled back, staring up, dumbfounded and enraged. He let go of the girl and pulled out his sword again. You're going to pay for that! Oh, I'll pay, a familiar voice replied. Who's this? A fireball lunged from the hole above, showering down on Richard. The man screamed in rage, collapsing to the ground as his body was engulfed in flames. Doc! Liam's eyes widened as figures started dropping down. Liam blinked in surprise. Hermits! They were all hermits. Doc stood before them, Joel on his left and Tango on his right. He was followed by others. Cub, Cleo, Joe, Wells, Azuma, Jevin, Hypno, Beef, XB, and their protectors. Black eyed cameos. Whoa, do we have an army? Sam whistled. False groaned from behind them as she stumbled to her feet. Good. Took them long enough, she said simply, holding her arm gingerly. You're hurt, Liam said quickly. False nodded. I'll be fine. It was worth the pain. Try to save the kids. Kids? Liam swallowed as he turned back to the scene. Doc was looming over the huddled form of Richard Jargon, his blaster aimed at the man's head. You're outnumbered and outmatched. I advise you surrender now. Your punishment may be more lenient if you do. Doc's stone eye flashed with rage. Huh? So, you're the doctor everyone's been blabbing on about, Rob said calmly, crossing his arms as he stood beside the bound YouTubers. Curious. Do you think we care about him? I would hope so. He is your ally, Doc said simply. They'd rather throw their men under the bus if it meant saving their own skin, Blake said simply. Rob left Kimberly and Jargon behind while he escaped. He sure doesn't care about anyone but himself. Careful what you say, boy. Rob smiled. I know how your protectors feel about us hurting your little charges. I have no problem dealing with them. Not if we can stop you first. Dan looked up before lunging at him, tackling the man to the ground. Robbie yelled in alarm, grunting in pain as he hit the hard ground. Scott got to his feet, followed by Stampy. Scott ran over to their cell while Stampy rushed to Kate's side, looking her over before pulling out a medical box. Somebody's got to do it. Where's Conover? Sam asked, his eyes scanning the area as Scott approached. I didn't see him in all that chaos. Liam frowned, hearing another explosion, followed by a yelp before it went quiet. He looked over, seeing items at Doc's feet. Richard Jargon was dead. He must have slipped out, Scott replied, glancing back into the room before unlocking the iron door. Think you guys can lend a hand? Absolutely, Blake nodded, running in the direction where Impulse and Green were strapped onto the chairs. Liam followed, arriving at Blake's heels just as the wall behind the hermits exploded. "Gran!" Liam cried, hearing his charges scream as the wall and part of the ceiling crumbled around them. Armored men jumped through the now gaping hole, armed with swords and gas blasters. "Oh no," Blake gulped, coming to a stop as well. "You heard what Conover said. Leave no survivors," one of the men shouted, shooting a fireball directly at the boys. Liam and Blake jumped out of the way as fireball exploded behind them, setting part of the machine ablaze. "We have to get them out of there," Liam screamed, beside Blake, checking to see if he was okay. "These guys, not likely," Blake frowned, looking over at the men approaching. One of them turned as the rubble shifted. "Green!" gasped for air as his face appeared a moment later. Liam got to his feet and charged at the man, grabbing him as he raised his weapon to fire. The man yelped in surprise as Liam hurtled him back, just as a fireball meant for him hit the man squarely in the back. The man screamed as he crumbled to the floor, bathed in flame. "Liam!" Green wheezed. The boy turned around and ran to his friend, spotting Blake not far behind, pulling off debris from impulse. "I'm here. It's okay. You're okay," Liam said softly, pushing the rest of the debris off the hermit before unclasping the restraints. Graham practically collapsed into his arms, sobbing. Liam held him tight, removing the shackles from the chair with his foot, before pulling his friend behind the chair. "Let's get these shackles off you." "The headband," Graham said through sniffs. He might. Liam nodded, unclasping the shackles from the hermit's ankles. He looked over his shoulder to see Dan running in their direction. "Here, you might need this," Dan said quickly, pulling something small out of his pocket before handing it to him. Liam grinned. "You read my mind." "False told Scott. Apparently the headband has some new tech that'll alert the machine if it goes anywhere without permission. Nasty shock." "Is Rob secured?" Liam asked. Dan nodded. "He's not going anywhere. We'll make sure of it, and of that." Liam sighed in relief, turning to Green, and he put the chip on the headband, pressing it as the gadget stamped off the hermit's forehead and clattered to the ground. Green reached for his forehead, massaging it gently. "Thank you. That's what friends are for." Liam smiled, getting to his feet. "Hang tight for a second. Blake needs this." He picked up the gadget and removed the chip. Green smiled and nodded. Liam handed the small gadget to Blake before returning to his charge. The room had grew quiet, the battle having ended as soon as it started. "Your friends are pretty good," Green giggled, leaning against the back of the stone chair. "Yeah." His face fell as he looked at Liam. "Can't be okay." "I don't know," Liam admitted, reaching for the hermit's shoulder. "But we need to get out of here before Conover calls for more men." Green nodded, his eyes moving to the machine. "Didn't work. Charles didn't come back." "He won't come back," Liam snapped. Green smiled sadly. "He's still in Rob, the other soldiers, with his eyes. We'll deal with them. We'll make sure there's nothing left," Liam said matter-of-factly. "I'm sure Stampy is going to make sure of that now more than ever." Green nodded, his eyes looking down at the floor. "I think I'm ready to go home." Liam laughed. "I think we all are. You need some rest." "But Gerald," Green whispered, glancing up at him briefly. "Don't be alone, man. He can't hurt you," Liam said firmly. "I'll be happy to spend a night with you through the headband if you like." "Really?" Green asked hopefully. "It's my job to keep you safe," Liam said simply. "And if that means I have to battle some nightmares for you, do it." Green nodded slowly before stumbling to his feet. Liam followed suit, standing beside the hermit, spotting everyone, cleaning up what was left of this short-lived battle. "How are we going to break the news to her if she survives?" Green whispered. Liam followed his gaze to the girl lying between Sam and Stampy. "She'll survive," Liam said confidently. "It might help knowing that in the end her father was proud of her. He saved her life." Tears filled Gran's eyes as he looked away. Liam wrapped an arm around his shoulders. Liam could just about hear the hermit's quiet sobs as his shoulders rose and fell. He understood that pain, seen it in so many other children who'd come to the school. YouTubers watched as their friends sacrificed their lives for one another. When he heard how his mother saved Lizzie's life at a lethal price, he pulled the hermit closer, letting him cry into his shoulder. There was still so much they had to do, especially when Carnival was still out there somewhere. But at least for now, they were safe. And that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and pardon for any background noise. Folks are getting ready for a soccer camp coming up, which is going to be cool. And so, yeah, I am spending some time making videos before I go on my trip. And, yeah, before I'm an emotional wreck, too. I'm already an emotional wreck. Yeah, saying goodbye to my aunt, losing my grandpa 5 days ago. Yeah, 5 days ago. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one, whenever that might be. Goodbye.